virtually teaching and want to reduce your planning time and also give your students better direction in your lessons? You know, I've been working with teachers lately and they just are overwhelmed. They are literally in tears and just don't know what to do because they feel like their lesson planning that they usually do is just not translating well to a virtual setting. So I want to share with you about the 80-20 principle and how you can use that to help in your lesson planning if you're teaching virtually or hybrid. Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm a counselor and a teacher coach. And today I want to tell you about how we can incorporate the 80-20 principle with lesson planning. And what it says is that 80% of what can be accomplished can be done with 20% of the work. Can we teach 20% of a standard and expect 80% of the impact? And how would we do that? Because I feel like that's what we need right now. How can we get the most out of each lesson because we have such limited amount of time and it's just not the same. So I have 6 steps I want to share with you when it comes to planning for a virtual lesson. And before I get to do that, I want to tell you that I have this template available on my website at cindyrosa.com. I'll put the link below so that you can use the template. Okay, so let's get started. Let's go with step number 1. Step number 1 is find the meat. What is essential and what is fluff? I know that there's tons that we have to teach, but when it comes to teaching in a virtual setting, we're not going to teach everything. It's impossible. So one great resource that you can use if you're doing Common Core standards is Achieve the Core. They have gone through and have made all the essential standards for math and language arts. We want to focus on the math and the literacy because those are going to be essential for students to be able to learn the new content for the upcoming year. Yes, the rock cycle is important, but is it really essential for students to know that right now? And so you got to pick and choose which ones are going to be important. Which lessons do you really want to hit hard and focus on? They have it for K through 12 for math and language arts. So it's a great place to go and look. I will make sure that I put the link below in the description so that you can take a look for yourself. So what about if you're not using Common Core standards? Maybe your district or your state doesn't use these standards. Well, then you want to get together with either your grade level, your department, sit together, look over what is your plan of action for the school year, and then again, look through it and pick only what is essential. What do you really want to focus in? Because there's no way that you're going to be able to complete all of those standards and really have them master it with such limited amount of time. All right, moving on to step number 2 is find the hook. You know, like the movie companies do such an awesome job of hooking us in with their trailers and their teasers, and it's because they do a good job of hyping it up and we get there and we want to see it, right? And so there's like this push and pull in education, and if we're always pushing that information, students are not gonna buy it. They're not gonna get hooked in, right? So we want them to pull and want the information. But how do we get students to do that? Like, how do we get students to want to learn something? And so a great hook is gonna just soar your engagement. I mean, it's just gonna skyrocket when you find the right hook. And through a virtual setting, your hooks can be memes, movie clips, GIFs. You know, if I was teaching fractions, I would use this picture because I would tell a story about how I had to share my pizza, and I hate sharing. And I had to share, and I had to cut my pizza, and then I had to share a slice of my pizza. And so that story would engage them into, well, what piece of the pizza was that, right? So you want to engage them. You want to pull them in with some kind of story. Storytelling is the best way of engagement, right? Think of a movie. It's telling you a story and you get engaged. And there's a lot of stories that you can tell for different lessons. They're gonna say, you know what, I want to know more about that. What else is that? You can just say, we're gonna read a story called Little Women, or you can say, okay, this story is a trip. Check this out. So the sisters, and you know, you just get into it and you get really involved. Students are gonna love that and they're gonna want to know more. So I want to share real quick an example of a hook here in this. If you've never used Kahoot, it's a great way to engage students. It's multiple choice questions and you can send them the link and then they can use that. So here's one for physical science, and I thought what a great way to incorporate incorporate in the beginning, do you guys watch X-Men? You know, you like Marvel, and then you talk about the superheroes. You know, I could see how students would enjoy this. You're thinking, you know, related to the characters. They're gonna be engaged, they're gonna be hooked into learning that, and it just makes it way more fun. And then you wanna remember that stories are just a great way to get students involved in what you're learning. Tell them a personal story about something and then just somehow bring that back into what you're trying to teach. And they're gonna remember that story, and they're more likely going to remember what you're talking about. You know, our brains just work better. That's the way we learn, and so you wanna make sure you incorporate that. Step number 3 is vocabulary. And so when it comes to like vocabulary, teaching vocabulary when we're virtual teaching, you gotta be very mindful and be very selective of what vocabulary you wanna teach, because you don't wanna be overwhelming. You don't want to incorporate all the vocabulary, because at this moment of time of how we're learning, we wanna be very mindful of not bombarding them with so much information, because it takes time to process. And in such a short amount of time, are they gonna be able to process all that information? But what you can do if you're virtually teaching and you're doing vocabulary is use memes, GIFs, YouTube videos. You can make your vocabulary come alive. Step number 4 is decide on learning objectives or goals. The difference between our objectives and goals post and pre-pandemic is that we have to be more concise. We have to be straight to the point. There can't be any fluff in our objectives. They have to just be straight to the point, and you really have to think about what is it that you want students to take away from your lesson. No more than 3 or 4 objectives, and that's because that's a lot of information for students to process, and it's a lot for the teacher to have to put together. So it's okay for your lessons to be very short and to the point. Maybe a lesson that usually would take you 1 day can take you 2 or 3 days. And that's okay, because there's so much more that comes with trying to teach a lesson virtually. And then make sure that your objectives are measurable, right? Because that's how you're going to check for understanding, is that if you can measure what students were able to complete. Okay, we're down to step number 5. Decide on activities and resources to expand your teaching of the objective. One thing that the activities that we no longer have are those awesome hands-on engaging activities. Those are no longer available, but there are things that you can use to make up for that. So the second best thing that is available are interactive simulators. And one awesome resource that you can use for these simulators is PhET. It's totally free, and they have for math and science all kinds of really cool simulators. So they have it for physics, chemistry, earth science, biology, math, and in the grade spans of elementary all the way through college. And they're super interactive and fun. Students can click on there and move things around. And the cool thing about that is that I actually think that simulators are a better way than videos, because there's a cause and effect, right? Videos, there's no cause and effect that you can manipulate, but the students can manipulate the cause and effect in a simulator, and they can learn from that. And so using simulators in your virtual lessons are going to be a great way, whether you're the one that is actually moving the items around or the students are experimenting and seeing the cause and effect as they manipulate what's on screen. So I'll make sure I put the link of that in our description. All right, and we're down to step number 6, deciding on key concepts and how to assess learning. Key concepts are the actual problems that you want students to answer or solve. Like, what is a takeaway from today? That's where you're working from. That's where you want to get them, and you want to look at the goal as you start planning, right? So that's why this template is important, because, I mean, you can start wherever you need to, but looking at that end goal is what's going to help drive your lesson and how you're going to get there. So I want to show you an example of the goal that I would have if I was teaching how to divide fractions, right? I would separate it into 3 different goals, and the third final goal, the key concept I want them to take away is actually being able to divide fractions. So in this example here, I have it so it's interactive, and I'd be able to see each student's answer as they answer, and I can give real-time feedback to that. This is using a Pear Deck, which is a web-based application that you can insert into your Google Slides. I do have a step-by-step on how to do this on my website so that you can learn how to incorporate that, because checking for understanding is like vital, right? We as educators, we know that checking for understanding is so important because it paces your lesson, it pivots your lesson when needed, and then it gauges engagement. You know how students are interacting with you. But when a virtual setting, checking for understanding can almost feel impossible. It's very difficult. And there's different ways you can do it. You can have students hold up whiteboards. You can do thumbs up, thumbs down. You can have them hold up a piece of paper and just show you. And there's like different issues with all of those, right? Students can just copy somebody, which could happen in the classroom too, that they could just copy somebody's answer on the whiteboard, so you don't really know if they really knew it. Students that are struggling are gonna see their peers how quickly they answer, and they might start feeling like, oh man, I'm really lost. I have no idea, and just start becoming disengaged because they feel like everybody gets it except for me. And some students are good at asking questions, and most are not. Especially in a virtual setting, students have a hard time asking for help. And then what about the issue of they don't have a camera, or they don't want to have their camera on? So how do you gauge engagement and check for understanding when this happens, right? Like I was saying, there's several different ways to be able to actively see if students are engaged, and there are a lot of cool, really awesome web applications that you can see, that you can use for that. And then in this video, I don't have time to go over all of those, but make sure you subscribe so that when I do post a video on the different ways that you can check for understanding in a virtual setting in real time, so that you can provide some feedback, you want to hear about that. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of that. If you head over to my website at cindyrosa.com, you can read more in depth about these 6 steps and how you can use them. And I have a sample lesson on there that you can look at and see how I broke down the lesson for a virtual setting. I want to recap real quick the 6 steps. Find the meat. Second step, find the hook. Number 3, limit your vocabulary. Number 4, decide on the objectives or the goals. Number 5, look for activities and resources to expand your teaching. And number 6, how will you assess understanding of the key concept? Click on the link in the description below to be able to access your free template for the planning. And also you can sign up for my course on how to step-by-step instructions on how to lesson plan in a virtual setting, and also how to check for understanding. I want to hear about your biggest challenges with lesson planning in a virtual setting. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you're struggling with, what it's like for you. And if you're in a hybrid model, how is that working out? What questions do you have? I really want to hear it.